Check, 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 check. Hi, Louisa.
How are you?
Good.
Sorry I missed last week.
Oh, no worries. Did you get the link to
I
the?
did, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's all. It's going to happen. It's a long haul. No, I can't imagine anybody being able to make all of them. So,
Well, it's we have such a 3 hour time difference, so
oh
um
right,
it's only almost 2 o'clock here.
oh right, yeah,
Yeah, so it's like sometimes 2 o'clock is like the
yeah,
busy time that I
right,
can't
yeah,
sign
yeah.
in.
Actually, right, out there doing things for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
But I'll do whatever I can.
awesome. Well, glad you're here.
Yes, me too.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. Sit down. I just came from Cheryl's. She served corned beef and cabbage.
Oh, nice.
Can you get down? There's nothing in this box for you. All right. I gotta get settled because I just got in. Hold it down.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good.
Good. Good day out there.
Yeah, if the wind would ever settle down, like, boy.
Well, did you have much branches down?
Well, the we had to chase the bubble down. So, but other than that,
Yeah, that would
the,
fly away.
the bubble flew away. But uh, I
Yeah.
think it seemed to have survived without too much trouble. So,
Good, good. That's good.
Am I signed in to the the camera? Because I can't see anything.
no, I have my video off. Hi,
Huh?
there I am.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. No, I was just putzing around here. So,
Amazon just came and like the
yeah.
dogs are like, what's in the box for me?
They know.
They're looking at me. No, I did get you treats, but not now. I haven't been a really good girl on my reading this week. I've been a little busy.
It's gonna
Well, that
happen.
happens.
Yep. As I said when we started, part of keeping a discipline is not keeping the discipline, and then being able to receive the grace to kind of come back at it and be able to be okay with that. It's part of that cycle of being able to um, fall down and get back up again. It's all part of it. So it's
It's tough though. I feel like if I'm not reading it and then go back because it's just like it's all Greek to me. The names and everything are just like all Greek. So it's hard
all
to
Hebrew. Yeah.
it's hard to
I find there's so many names that I can't keep up with all the names. It's just there's hundreds of them. And then they're hard to pronounce. But I get the gist of it. Like how many kids they had, like 15 kids, and you had to remember all those names.
Right.
So the funny thing is, because Andy, you know that I can go back all these generations, and all the old Yankees, their names are like Isaac and Gideon and Reuben, and it's
Yes.
like, wow, look at all my ancestors with biblical names.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah,
was.
that's what they did.
Yep.
What?
And it was yeah, it was in many ways it was about like yeah, the naming conventions too were really about imbuing a child with those qualities. Like that was the hope, is like if you had a Reuben, it would be somebody who was particularly faithful, or if you had an Isaac, it was somebody that was,
I had two
you know,
Isaacs.
so
Two
so
Isaacs.
yeah, so that there was this way of
He was the Revolutionary War name. That and a Thomas. Yeah, I mean, but
You,
Reuben, we're all like, well, where did those names come
no,
from?
you
Now I
cannot
know.
yeah.
on his no.
Hi Deb. Hi Christine. Glad
Hello.
you made it. I know you're always coming in hot, like so. What do
All
you
good.
what
All
do you hear
good.
from
And
Liam?
you know what? What a miracle. I heard from him on his birthday.
Oh,
March 14th was his birthday, and I had been all kind of wound, and he called me on his birthday and he looks great. He's
awesome.
doing all right. And yep, he knew a few of the guys that, were from Okinawa that got shipped over there, but he's okay. He's feeling good about, the exercises that he's leading his men onto. And he just left this morning. He'll be 7 more days kind of sleeping out in the mountains.
Back in the
And
field, yep.
then they're coming back. And then I think they have another week, and then they're going to 29 Palms down
Oh,
in California. Well, they'll be for till mid-April.
good old 29 stumps.
Yep, that's yeah. Yeah, that's where he'll be. And you know, he's deciding whether he wants to throw his hat in the ring for the tryout for special team or special forces. And but there's also he's thinking about, or maybe I just want to get a job and go live in San Diego for a little bit. And I'm like, San Diego, I'd love to visit San Diego. That's like an
Right.
easy plane ride. Yeah.
Right.
So you know what, my challenge is to keep my mouth shut and to listen and to say, you know, Liam, pray on it, and just
Yeah.
kind of the things will open up and become clear. And then I'll come to church and cry.
That's, this is,
So
this is the place to leave those things. Exactly. Yep.
buckle up, everybody.
Right.
Uh,
Got a few more people coming along here. Hello, friends. All right. Give it one more minute. I think we expect a couple more, so they're coming along. Somebody just popped in, but you don't have a tag, so I'm not sure who it is on their iPhone.
2 iPhones in there. Look at Jerry looking like the mayor.
Hey. Not his first day on Zoom. Yeah. All right, let's get going, friends. Let's say a prayer and then we'll then we'll kind of get into it. So, Lord, there's much that we carry in this time. There's much that's on our hearts. There's much that is the busyness of our minds, the complications of the day, and all that come with it. We ask that in this hour, in this moment, that we be able to set those aside, that we might give them to you, and that you, the maker of all things, the holder of all things, might hold the busyness of our lives and the concerns of our day, so that we might simply be able to come and study your word and be with you and a part of and understand our part in this story in which we encounter, and that we might see ourselves in this word, and by doing so, we might see you. Lord, we pray all of this in your name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So welcome, friends. So here we are. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It is a great way to spend it here. Spend a little time on Bible. We're into this version of we're started into Judges, and then we get into this little prophetic part with Samuel, and then Samuel quickly transitions into the looking for a king, and then the king we get Saul, and then we begin the introduction into David. So that's what we're covering tonight. So as we get into that, but let's start with just talking about how it was in terms of our reading this week. Liz has already kind of entered the confessional and said she had some struggle staying on task this week, and again, it's a reminder of like part of keeping a discipline is not keeping the discipline. It is baked into it, and how we can just take that as an opportunity to kind of throw ourselves on God's grace and to understand our need for grace and to begin and to just fall down and get back up. That in the great words of Richard Rohr, that both in the falling and in the getting up again, it's the grace of God. So how was the reading this week in terms of being able to keep the disciplines and stuff?
Good.
Were you able to read every day, Jerry, and kind of stay with it, or how did it feel?
Oh no, I'm not having any problem with that. Is that I've got time to read, you know. One of the things that confused me was, for example, if you look at 31, it says Samuel listens to God, and it's 1 Samuel, and it's 1 through 3, the first chapter. But then it looks like it skips all the way over to the next chapter 21 and do the whole thing. So I don't know quite how to figure that.
So the first Samuel 8 reading, that one where or the where so
Yeah,
we
the first
we have
Samuel. Say that one.
right. So we have 3 readings. So we have 4 readings today from First Samuel. So we have
Right. But the
first,
first one.
For
yeah,
Samuel listens to God.
yeah. So Samuel 1 and through so the verse basically mostly the first 3 chapters just about a little less than that.
Okay.
Yep.
And finish up on 21 in chapter 3.
On verse 21 in chapter
Got
3.
it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I did. I just wanted
Okay,
to.
great. Yep. Yeah, I know they make some, it is true, like they make some weird kind of, they divide the lines weird sometimes on this. I'm not quite sure, like why don't I just read the whole chapter? But they're trying to make it as I think they're trying to keep it as clear, keep the narrative as clear as possible. So, yeah. What else? How else was the reading this week?
I got a Bible app and I liked it. Most of the time I was reading on it and it was just kind of clear and easy. It is the New King James Version. But I liked that. But then also I was feeling like I was falling behind. So one of the things I liked about the app was that it would read it to me, which I didn't do all the time because I prefer to read it. I don't intake things as well. I'm not an audio learner, but I was just feeling behind. So when I was taking a shower, I listened to Ruth's story and, that kind of thing. So I found that helped a lot, even though it's not my top choice.
Is that a
So
free app?
It is free with like ads, and it annoyed me, so I paid for it. I didn't pay tons, but I paid for it because the ads were annoying me because they were kind of like after every single bit. But I know there are some good free apps, and Andy might be able to recommend some. I like the New King James Version, and a lot of people that's not their preference, but I enjoy it. So I wanted this one.
Oh.
And I kind of like the way they were reading it too. It didn't sound too digitized. So,
one of the interesting things about the whole reception of Bible, particularly this section of Bible, it as far as humanity goes and humanity's encounter with these texts, they have been heard and read aloud way more than they have been read silently. And in fact, they're kind of designed to be read aloud and to be listened to, as opposed to sit down and read them on a page. We've been reading on a page as a people for about 500 years. These texts have been around for, what are we, 4,000 years. So, for 3,500 of those, the vast majority of people did not have a scroll of First Samuel sitting in the back room. I mean, those were extremely rare and extremely valuable. Most people were at temple or at worship and heard these texts read, so there's something to that of listening to them versus you'll hear them and encounter them in a different way. So that's cool. Thank you.
Is
I don't know if, this was kind of, I did fine with the reading this week, but what I found myself doing is wondering why these particular readings? What are the themes and what are the connections in these readings as to why they were chosen, right?
Great question. Great question. So when you get to those particular ones, make sure you bring that up because that is um, it's a great point of topic for discussion because there were decisions made and
Right.
we can talk about why they made those decisions and about these these judges, and why not some of the other ones, and why not some of the other
Right.
stories? But and yeah, we can talk about that. Thank you.
What I find interesting is the numbers that are very important, the 40 and the 7 and the 3 that keep appearing throughout the readings. And I'm also reminded that God has a purpose for everybody, because as we're reading, there are names that you never hear again, but they're in the Bible, but God didn't have a purpose going forward. But I mean, they were important at the time, but they disappear after one time. But, there were people that he really had a purpose for. So I guess that applies to our lives.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful insight, because it really is. Um, I mean, particularly in our age of, I'm one among 7.3 billion, like who cares? How can I make a difference? What am I doing? And yet you have this, you know, one little Yahoo out there who, without him, the Battle of Gideon doesn't happen, or without him, the story of Christ coming into the world and the story of the salvation of humanity doesn't make it. And yet it's a one-off thing. And the I mean, the same really can be said of us. Like, it really is. Like, I mean, God, the kingdom will come, but at the same time, there's a particular thing in which we're appointed to, and there's a particular time that we're appointed to, and there's a particular thing that God's called us to do, and that's true in all of us. And that's such a neat thing to pull out of that. And thank you, Deb, for that. That's really lovely.
Agree.
Anything else All right, well, let's get into the text then. So we are in Judges, and so the first so we covered, so we got it the end of last week. We got into the beginning of Judges. Why is there Judges? Basically, the people have, everything's gone to hell. The people are following the pagan gods, and so when things get really bad, God raises up a kind of this militant prophetic character to help bring them back into line, or at least help rescue them. And they're called the judge. And so the judge is raised up, and then they do their job, and the people kind of get closer to God, and then the judge goes away, and then there's a kind of a time of peace, and then the people fall back. And so this is the rhythm that we get in Judges. So we saw last week, we ended with Deborah, and then now we are coming to the battle, the Gideon, and the battle with the Midianites. So Israel, again, they fall into idolatry. When they're in idolatry, there's not so much God can do with them, and so they fall. So the Midianites are kind of get in control. They're oppressing them, so the Lord calls out Gideon, and Gideon's not that into this, but he's like, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." So he's like, "There's a lot of them. There's not many of us." And God's kind of like, "Oh yeah." And so, well, now there's even fewer of you. And it's like, and Gideon's still like, "Now I really don't know." And he's like, "Oh yeah." And so now there's even fewer of you. And finally they get down to 300 of Gideon's army, and as a way of humbling Israel, not because they're not going to win, but because to make the point that it is God's power that they're winning by, not their own. So there's this way in which, so off they go, and the Gideon small army, routs the Midianites, and they display kind of God's saving power against it's not us that does it, but it is God's power that does it. And that's the story of. So any responses to that? Any thoughts about that?
One thing I wrote down, I can't remember exactly, but I wrote down that how, Gideon tests God. He asked God to prove himself. And that's interesting to me because it's, and God complies. Kind of what we had talked about, like Chris, you pointed out last week. I can't remember the exact story, but this, negotiating and relationship. And we see it again with Gideon. And it's curious because in some ways these themes, when God is tested, he punishes people. And yet here he doesn't punish, he proves himself and allows, again, Gideon is serving him and he's reconvinced. So I just found that curious.
Right. So, it's different. Just like a child, you don't discipline a 5-year-old the way you discipline a 15-year-old, or maybe you do, I don't know. But but there's a different in kind of the maturation and the of what the Israelites can handle. And so there's this way in which, sometimes they need to say, like, God, I need to know what's going on. Like, I need you to show me something, because and we have to remember kind of where Israel was at this point. Like, Israel is they've been uh, um, they've been following the pagan gods. And that allowed the Midianites to take over and control. They've kind of been kind of wandering off. And so there's this way in which, God's point is to bring them back and to show him. And so it's like, okay, I need my man Gideon. All right, Gideon, what do you need to get you on board? And so there's this way in which we often, the splashy ones are when God is out there kind of, kicking butt and taking names. But there's often this, I think we often find these in these stories, a much more relational God, a much more, like Chris pointed out, as you said, like Chris pointed out last week. So there's God that's like kind of in it with him and saying, like, look, okay, what do you need? Like, what do you need to get? All right, like, all right, we'll give you that. All right, now let me show you that we're gonna that things are gonna be that it's my power and not your power. So there's this very kind of instructive kind of piece being brought along. So
also, I think that um, Gideon's doubts, just like our doubts, don't disqualify us from serving our purpose. You'll notice through all of these stories, everybody is serving their purpose, and it's in the next dude, whatever his name is, the not awesome one, he served his purpose despite having so many issues. Every single one of these people have flaws, and they're not being disqualified necessarily from participating. They might not be true of heart, or they might have questions, or they might, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a purpose to serve, just like all of us do.
I think God always wants us to follow with our hearts too. And there are times when he wants us to follow the heart that he believes too that he needs to more greatly explain himself or whatever to the person he wants to utilize. And so rather than punish, he's opening himself up to this positivity. Whether I'm saying this well or not, I'm not really sure. But I think it all comes back to following through the heart and not out of absolute fear or a miracle. It's an understanding and a heartfelt help God. If that makes sense.
yeah, no, you're right on point. It really is this idea of, you could like, if we compare it to, the disciplining of Israel when Moses comes down and finds them all worshiping the golden calf. Like, who gets disciplined? Well, the people who don't want to be in relationship with, who don't see that they actually did a bad thing. Like, the people who don't want to come back into relationship with God in the proper way. Like, those are the people who are like, I can't, so it's really about the desire to be in relationship with God. And when we find, like, and in Gideon, like, he's game, he's just not sure. And so God's like,
Right.
okay, you're game, you're not sure, that's fine, we can work with that. Versus the the recalcitrant folks up, that when Moses came off the mountain, and the people who didn't think that there was a problem, there wasn't a lot that God could do with them. Just like why why during the battles, there's a sense of you have to go in and you know uh, kill this group of people, because there's not a lot we can do with there's not a lot of
Right.
repentance from human cannibalism and from human sacrifice. There's not a lot we can do
I'm
with
thinking
that.
about I'm thinking about forgiveness too. I think this all is in line with the concept of forgiveness. God doesn't expect us to be perfect. He does forgive even in their imperfections, as long as our hearts are in the right place. And I say this is a parallel. It's on the same line.
Yep.
If that makes
Yes.
sense.
Very much so. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. So the next one is our good friend Samson. You know, worst period judge period ever period. Samson is horrible at everything. So because again, we get into this judges cycle. Israel has gone wandering off, following the pagan gods. God gives, now it's the Philistines that are oppressing them. And he announces that Samson's birth, as a Nazarite, sets him apart. So he's got this kind of virgin birth thing going on. So he's this kind of proto Jesus a little bit, but he's kind of the proto anti Jesus also at the same time. He's got all the gifts, right? Like he's pretty, he's got nice hair. We hate him. He's called to deliver Israel. And he's called to deliver Israel, but he's driven by desires. He's driven by impulses. He ends up kind of in the flirtation with the Philistines as much as anybody else. He's out there, playing with the ladies. And finally, Delilah comes along, figures out that his secret is the power of his hair, cuts his hair. He's captured. He's blinded, humiliation, even though he's been out killing Philistines. And he's chained in the temple. And then his last burst of strength, he pulls down the pillars, and kills even more Philistines in that act, and somehow kind of is this figure of God's judgment on the Philistines, but at the same time, this kind of wildly tragic and kind of dysfunctional figure. So, what do you make of the story of Samson and Delilah? It's a classic. It's a classic. Sunday school lesson. Everybody loves it.
I didn't get a chance to read it, but I will go back and read it. I mean, I have read it, but I haven't I haven't read it in a long time.
Right.
But from your description, I will make certain that I go and read it and look at it with more depth than I have before. Because I always saw Samson as a hero, but you're saying there's something more to him than a hero. So that's interesting to me. I'm done with my comment.
I think it was a good story.
Oh, Claire, you muted yourself, Claire.
There, how's that?
There you go.
Okay. I believe that Samson, like all of us, we start out on the right foot and then we stumble and we fall. And then there are times that we wake up and stand up and say, well, no, I've got to go back in this direction. I took the wrong road and I've got to go back and do the right road. And I think that's what he did, even though he had to sacrifice himself doing it.
You're such a nice person. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even put him off on the right foot. Like, I think he starts off on the wrong foot right out of the jump street. I don't even see a lot of
But God
repentance in
chose
him.
him
But
for that. He
yeah.
chose him because I think God knows what how we can fill his expectations. And he chooses these people because they are the right people. And even if they fail him, that was his chosen person. So I believe that in the end that he showed his real true self and he got lost along the way.
Yeah. See, now I actually
It was a
like that.
great movie,
I
right?
actually see that. I actually, and I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong. I'm just saying like that actually, that's a much, I think, like, I think that's kind of driving more what this story is pointing us towards. That to me feels like that. It's this, you know, that there, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are actually powerfully and horribly corrupt people in this world and some of them even have PowerPoints, even have seats of influence. Like they exist, and yet God is still using them to do a thing in the world that maybe even a good judge wouldn't have pulled off. You know, that maybe the judgment that had to happen against the Philistines in order to protect the people of Israel, because remember, God isn't judging the Philistines because he just, like they wear funny hats. He's judging them because they're actively trying to destroy the true, the good, and the beautiful in both in all the world. They're worshiping Dagon, which is this, horrible fish god. They're making human sacrifices. They're doing all those things that are inherently evil. And so it's to protect the people of it. It's to protect Israel. It's to protect the law. It's to protect the connection between God and the people. So it's this and so you have this kind of really awful character who actually is
So
being
true.
used though by God to as an implement of salvation for the people of Israel for at least for one more generation,
Right.
so
It's kind of exactly what it's like when I was asking about what are the themes. And I think what's striking here is that in all of these different stories, people, maybe except for Ruth, are incredibly flawed to one degree or another. And yet, as you often say in your sermons, Andy, that's where God often finds us the most, in our flawed, broken places. And it feels like that's kind of the central theme of all of the readings this week. All of our characterological flaws. And in some, there's examples of loyalty and with Ruth, right? But in this, it's like, these are really kind of very complicated people. And yet, God still finds a way through them to show his power and to show his grace. And I think that resonates to all of our own lives. Like when we find ourselves in places like this, that we're flawed. And it's like, okay, welcome to our humanness, right? And we can still come back over and over in relationship.
Sometimes,
just open the message. Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Deb.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Deb.
sometimes I think God wants us to do one thing, but it also proves that we also have free will. And sometimes he lets us go that way, in that direction. And that's how these characters are flawed. But then they do end up doing God's will, as you said.
I think about God's trust too. God's trusting in us in many ways. We do, even though we screw up for a while, we end up back on the right track and get accomplished what he wished us to. I'm done.
And it's really, if you look at these, particularly these judges' stories as we get to Ruth next, they're all about like really making the point of who's in charge. Even though, like, is it your power or is it God's power? It's really God's power that even through such a joker like Samson, God's power and God's protection for Israel can still be operated, and that in that God that even a clown like Samson can be redeemed in that. Like even that, and so there's this. And that's kind of and that is and there's an interesting thing here because this is we're going to get our little palate cleanser in Ruth, but then we're going to continue this story of the of this kingship, of the kind of the journey to kingship, and it's like this even all of these kind of flawed things is still preferential to, to the kingdom. This kind of direct leaning on God's power is still better than kind of having the kingship that's going to come. So okay, let's get into Ruth. So we're in. So it's still set in the same time, but this is kind of one of those. The camera. We're looking at the time of Ruth and at the time of the judges, and then the camera kind of kind of goes in on this one little family. Of Bethlehemites. Bethlehem of Moabites and Bethlehemites. So it's and so the famine comes. Elimelech's family from Bethlehem, they end up in Moab. His sons die, and they leave Naomi and her Moabite daughters-in-law widowed. And so Ruth and Naomi become inseparable. Ruth kind of is loyal to Naomi, and also she kind of casts her lot with her. She says, "Okay, I'm sticking with you." And to Israel's God. So it's this whole so she kind of abandons the Moabite gods and is now going to stay with Naomi. So she returns to Bethlehem. So do you understand? Did you get what it means when they said they were gleaning the fields? Was that clear? So in the Old Testament, they basically there was a rule that you basically left the very edges of the field unharvested, and those were for the poor. That was basically the welfare system of the day. Is that there was a certain little strip around the edges of your field, and that the poor people and people who were poor could come and glean the wheat off of the edges of the field, and that was so that you could harvest 90 whatever percent of it, but the little parts around the edges were for basically the widows and the orphans, because those were the people that were really the indigent. And so here are these two widows kind of doing what widows do, because out there, gleaning at the edges of the field, and then comes along our hero Boaz. And this gracious relative who protects and provides for her. Naomi kind of gives her the little ways of getting to get to know Boaz, and Boaz responds kind of in all the right ways and secures the right to marry Ruth, and they preserve the family line, and their son becomes. And so this is the preservation of the Davidic line, of which Jesus is a part. And so to Deb, to your point, the other, like here are these, that Ruth's faithfulness as a Moabite, deciding to cling to Naomi and follow Israel's God, becomes the thing that saves the line of Christ coming into the world. That it hinges upon this, and that's this line, which is kind of gets to that, which is for this story. It's like, well, why do we include this story as it seems like a story of a couple widows, but it's actually this notion that the line of Christ is not only coming through all these heroes that we've been seeing, even though they're wildly flawed, but it's also coming through those who are most at the margins. You can't get any more at the margins than a Moabite widow in Bethlehem. I mean, that's as low as it gets. There is no one lower on the social structure of ancient Israel than a foreigner in Israel that is a widow. That has nobody to go for her. Like, she is at the, and part of it is a symbol of, maybe flipping too many cards here, but part of it is a symbol of the redemption of Jesus. It's this little tip of the hat about that Jesus's redemption goes all the way down to the bottom of the social hierarchy. And in fact, what we find, like in the harrowing of Hades in Holy Saturday, is the redemption of Jesus actually goes all the way to the bottom of hell. And that's what, and it's, so there's this beginning idea of that in the story of Ruth, where she is the lowest of the low in the hierarchy and in the world, and yet it is through the lowest of the low that the line of Jesus is preserved. So that's part of the reason for the why for the story too. So what how was it, how was that, and how was encountering so you go ahead, yeah.
So obviously she was loyal. So she was loyal to her mother-in-law. She was faithful to God, but then she also did the work, which I think is relevant because she did the daily tasks. What do you say? Carry water. She
Chop wood, carry water. Yeah.
Chop wood, carry water. So she went through what she needed to go through. It wasn't a miracle. Boaz wasn't a miracle that came to her. It was, being true. It was just moving through the world in a true way. And yes, obviously she did get the eye of Boaz, but but good for her,
Yeah.
But
But no, your point is right on, because it is the faithfulness of this. I mean, it is her faithfulness. Like that is like it really is, and all the things. Like it's she does the work. She's not waiting for she is faithful in all the different arenas of life. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's it. That's kind of what, and it's through that faithfulness of the lowest of the low that the line of Christ comes. Like that's really astute.
I hear Mary there too. It's a parallel to Mary, I guess, to me. Mary's just absolutely faithful, and that's why she's chosen by God to be the mother of Jesus.
Right. Nobody else any thoughts about the story of Ruth? Whither thou goest, I'll go. No, nobody. Okay, let's get into the Samuels. So we've got the 4 readings from Samuel. So Samuel is there's this. So we see this gear shift now, where we're in this time of Judges. We're in this kind of cycle of violence. Basically, is what was happening. Is they'd get in trouble, they'd raise up a judge, the judge would do some violence, like they'd get back on track, then they'd fall, and there'd be some peace for a while. They'd fall down, there'd be another judge. So now there's this more prophetic. God has shifted gears in how He wants to communicate with the people and how He wants to relate to the people. So there's this relationship shift in that happens. So Hannah is distressed because she can't have kids, and so she pours out her heart to God and vows that if God gives her a son, she will dedicate him to the Lord. And God answers with Samuel, and so she brings him to serve under Eli the priest. And so now we see this. So we saw these kind of warrior guys. Now we're starting to see. Oh wait, we're getting a little closer to God here. Now the priests are going to have a little bit more of a way to be in relationship with God. And so, but Eli has raised a bunch of yahoos, and who are not faithful, and who are taking bribes and staying on all night, running the roads, as they would say back in Maine. But along comes Samuel, who is faithful and becomes recognized as the trustworthy prophet of God. So basically now God notice the way the dialogue shifts. Before it was, okay, there's this, they've fallen away. I'm going to raise somebody up. I'm going to talk to somebody and get them to come up and do this heroic thing. Now there's this kind of ongoing dialogue between God and the prophet. It's like, okay, the prophet's going to go over and talk to God. And it's okay, what do you think about this? Well, I think this is okay. All right, then we go back to the people. What do you think about this? So now there's this God and the people have actually become closer in in this new kind of structure. And so Samuel is the new leader. So thoughts about that?
Can I just say I'm so sad for not doing my homework because I am so left out in the dark and I'm missing all of this and I gotta go back.
It's not going anywhere. So don't worry. This is all being recorded. You can read, you can come back to this conversation. It's all still here. We're not,
I'm taking notes, but
That's how I felt,
it's
though.
not the same, not being,
Yeah.
right.
in the now.
That's why I did it I tried to get better because I was not enjoying being behind and just kind of,
Yeah, I don't like being behind.
Yeah. My thoughts on that. I had some. Hold on. I took notes. Just give me a second. Once again, I just think it's always the same theme. He's always choosing the least of, like you said. So Samuel's a kid, David's the youngest son, it's just always so. I just think that is when you talk about themes, that's just throughout the whole thing, and it just continues all the way. So, which is important for all of us to know because we can all be the least of these at different moments. So, but also I thought I thinking about Eli. So Eli ends up being, judged because of his sons, and I think that's a relevant little part too, that the leadership, what you do with your children, even if you're faithful, that there's more to it. You have to also teach. You have to participate and put that faith into the world the best you can. And also, it really sounds like the Israelites were really exhausting back then. I'm just
We're still
saying,
pretty exhausting now,
yeah, exactly. We're all very exhausting. Everybody, humans, people are so exhausting. He's like, okay, so judges didn't work. Let's try this now, and it feels like it's kind of this ever changing process of how do I convince you all to be loving, be in a loving relationship with me? And we still haven't figured it out. Right now, all of this reading is just making me think so much about how disconnected our society is with God and how agnostic and we've all become, not we all, but me sometimes, you know what I mean? There have been times in my life. And it just makes me think about the lack of faith in our world. Ryan was the only kid I knew who went to church. He's the only kid he knew who went to church. None of his cousins, none of his friends, none of, and even the few that he would meet in church would leave because of sports, because, it's like you choose between sports or religion. And I don't know. It's just, it all feels very lost sometimes to me. And these stories just keep rolling around the same thing. The Israelites start worshiping the wrong things. I think it's safe to say we worship the wrong things now, whether that be our, little phones or whatever. I don't know. The reading made me feel a little exhausted because I'm like, again, come on, how long are we going to do this until the end of time? That's when.
That's it. You're preaching Sunday, honey.
All right.
Think about Ryan. Think about Ryan and kids, though. I know for myself that I was heavily churched as a kid, but I got away from it because of sports. But as I grew older, it's always been with me. I always come back, and so Ryan and maybe his friends and kids will come back as I've come back because it's within you. It's always there, and it will remanifest itself. We hope.
Yeah.
So, and I put myself out there as the example because I know it's real. Because I did come back. It never left.
And one of the things to just in this text, all of this is exactly what they were responding to, except and in spades, because the fact that Eli's sons would not inherit Eli's post, regardless of their quality, their quality you go to the I think Magnus made this point a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago about if you spend any time in the Middle East, you spend any time working in that world, that the first son is everything, the second son is nothing. And it doesn't matter the quality of the first son. It doesn't matter if they're a good guy, if they're a bad guy, if they're a tyrant, if they're a good character, bad character. They have the reins of power. They get the influence. They get the position when dad sets it down. Nobody judges about like, well, the second son would be a better quality. Like, and the fact that in this case, not only is it not the second son, but it is this adopted kid who's been dedicated to the Lord. Like, who are you to be the like? And it's this massive inversion of the power of the world versus the power of the moral, the true, the good, and the beautiful. That actually no, the person who has been dedicated by God should be the one leading. The one that has actually heard the voice of God and has responded to it. That's the person that should be in charge and should be leading. And this is God's continued. That's why we keep seeing these inversions. It's not just that God has a problem with power in terms of like the most powerful being the ones who are blessed. I mean, we'll see that in David. We see, that good things happen, but at the same time, we'll see that there's this. It's always this movement towards the better quality versus the right position, and the movement towards drawing things towards the true, the good, and the beautiful, and the kind of the institution of Eli is like that in spades, like that in a huge way, which is kind of. Okay, go ahead.
No, what I love about this is also, and in kind of what you highlighted as the verse is, Samuel's response. Speak, your servant is listening, right? We saw that in Moses too. And Moses, like, who am I? Who am I to lead? And I think it's a wonderful example of, yes, like Chris says, we have learned nothing as humans in all these years. We're not evolved at all. We're the same as we always were. However, what a beautiful reminder of pay attention and listen, because God's still speaking to us. And if we humble ourselves enough and are open to listening, we're still seeing these things too in all of our humanness, that God is still there. And if we pay attention to all these little things that come up, Andy, I shared with you the miracle of me hearing from Liam on his birthday, right? When I was so down, and to just have that. And it's like, we talked before about the miracles that are in front of us all the time, if we're just paying attention, and how God is directing us and how we could be of service to him, or how we can find comfort in these experiences.
That's
Good
beautiful.
stuff, Christine.
Thanks. That's awesome. All right, so let's keep going with Samuel. So Samuel 8 and 10. So Israel asks for a king. So and they end up with Saul, kind of a little bit like the booby prize, but they get it. They win it nonetheless. Here is Samuel, and this story of Samuel's getting old. He doesn't, there's nobody really to lead, and yet and the Israelites want a king. We want a king. We want to be like all the other kids. I want the Air Jordans just like all the other kids, and they effectively reject God's rule. Like, God has this plan of working through the prophets. I'm going to speak to the prophets. You listen to the prophets. We'll be one big happy family. This will work out. And yet the people reject this prophetic idea because the world is organized by this realm of violence, essentially. These kings who are showing up and warring with each other, taking over other people's territories. And so Samuel tells them, look, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to get taxes. You're going to get conscription. They're going to take the very best of everything you have. And they still say, yep, we still want a king because we still want to be like all the other kids. I don't care how many, I don't care. I'll get the face tattoo. I don't care. I want to look like the other guys. Sorry if anybody has a face tattoo, I apologize. So God instructs Samuel to grant their request, because he says they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me. You're not doing a bad job. They want, and so God instructs them to grant their request, and he anoints Saul. This again, from the tribe of Benjamin, the least tribe, the smallest tribe, and through signs and through this kind of public forecast. There's some pageantry here, like there's some like the coronation that we think about that happens both with his anointing and with the ephod, and then Saul is confirmed as king, and some like it, some don't. There and again, which is this kind of foreshadowing of what's going to happen through the entire monarchy, is that that Israel is really always going to be split around the monarchy in one form or another. There's always going to be they'll never really be fully united under a king. Even under David, the highest point, there'll still be these rebellions even under David. That they'll always be chafing at the bit because of what it means to have a king. I'm going to take your best sons, and I'm going to throw them in the meat grinder of war. I'm going to take your best daughters, and I'm going to marry them off to people of power and influence. I'm going to take your best crops and your best food, and I'm going to eat it for myself. That this is what it means to have an imperial system. But they sign up and they get Saul. So thoughts about that? What was it like to read this? Did everybody become libertarians as a result? What happened?
In my
I
treatise,
did.
go ahead. Go ahead,
I
somebody
said,
else, go ahead.
I did become a libertarian from reading it, but never mind. Yeah, so I think the couple things that struck me was just the general desire to conform that we still struggle with, and that God will permit, your choices. So he's not going to strike you down because you made the choice, but you will have to suffer the consequences of your choices. And I don't mean that in a harsh way, so I think that's this little part just kind of talks about that. You want to be like everyone else so much that you're willing to give up your, yourself, your freedom, your children, your, whatever. And I'm telling you not to do it. Like, guys, don't do this. All right. And they still want it. And then you have to go through that. And that's just the constant learning of, being present in the cycle and the working through it and the decisions that we make. And I don't know. It was a lot. I felt like, I don't know. This whole thing has felt like a lot this week. Like there's a lot going on.
And what's interesting in that is that, why was it that they wanted a king so much, right? That yes, they wanted to be like everybody else because the king gave you power and that you can conquer and be victorious. And what you were referencing before about kind of the worldliness and what are the values of the world. And the values of the world are strength and power and conquering and power over others. And here we are. That's seemingly what I took away from this, the of why they wanted a king so much. And boy, here we are again, right? From the ancient world to 2026, power, dominion over others, and kings, right?
Yep. They wanted
They want kings.
exactly. They wanted the spoils of war. That's what
Yeah.
they wanted. Like that, when you go to war, if you win, you get
Yeah.
stuff. You get slaves, you get things, and they wanted they wanted the king because everybody else had a king, and they wanted the
Right.
spoils of war that would come
Mhm.
from that. They wanted and the prestige and all the other things that come with it. And oh, by the way, foreshadowing event, like when we get to the fall of Saul, the when Saul is replaced by David, what we'll encounter there is what the failure of Saul, why God removes God's presence, God's blessing on Saul, is because Saul is afraid of the people, of not giving the people the spoils of war, because the command was kill all the livestock, kill everything, because it's all been tainted by human sacrifice, and you can't have the human sacrifice. You can't be a part of the spoils of human sacrifice. Like that's not okay. And so, but he didn't do it, and he didn't do it because he was afraid that if he did it, what the people wanted were the spoils of war. They wanted that cattle, they wanted that gold, they wanted all this stuff that they'd won from those battles, and he was afraid that if he did what God said, that the people would turn on him, that he didn't trust God. And that's why God ends up. So the very issue that we just mapped out is actually the thing that will later get Saul in trouble. So it's a theme. It's not just this isn't just a one-off theme. This is actually the theme that goes all the way through the story of the kings.
And it happens over and over and over again, not just then, not just 2026, but everybody in between. It's
Right.
just it's been consistent forever. So
All right, we're getting short on time, so I want to make sure we get at the least to talk about David and Goliath a little bit. So again, so we just talked about, so God removes God's blessing on Saul, and he finds again, and again he finds the youngest son, who is a shepherd, which is the lowest of the lowest of the low. He smells like sheep. That in the ancient world, and he comes in, and he's going to be the anointed. The Spirit of the Lord comes powerfully on David, and it's so much so that he's able to contend with the evil spirit that has taken over Saul. And this is that forecasting that Saul not only has God, part of what the reason God has removed God's blessing on Saul is that Saul has kind of permitted himself to be taken over by this evil spirit of wanting spoils and wanting all the lickies and chewies that come with them. And so David he can soothe that, and he can ameliorate that with his harp playing, and then he goes and fights Goliath with his 5 smooth stones, doesn't take Saul's armor. He plants one right in the forehead on Goliath, and the people are victorious. And Saul and Jonathan make a pact that David will be the next king, a kind of in secret, in the next chosen leader. So what was that? What did you think about that?
I think about the smallness of the stones and not taking not that this is really that relevant, but I connect it to the 300 soldiers and to the marching around the tower, and it's over and over again, the battles must be won through faith and God, and following what you see as good and true in that, because
God's power, not our power, right?
Right, God's power, not our power, and this is just another example of that. I mean, Saul's a different story, but that's what I kind of gathered from the whole David and Goliath, is that it's the repeat of the same thing, and the same. That's it.
Well, and it's hopeful because it's like in bringing it back to can feel overwhelming but we're up against these forces of evil, like you say, over and over and over again. And there's hope in staying true and staying on the path and staying in connection and staying kind of, keeping the eye where it belongs, because it can get really depressing and overwhelming, like the evils that we're constantly dealing with in today's world. It feels insurmountable at times. And yet there's these stories of hope. And here's David against this seemingly insurmountable figure of Goliath. And yet he stays true to his faith. And it's like, okay, I can take that in. That can give me some peace. And okay, that's the course. And it's just a beautiful reminder of staying the course. I can't control all this other stuff, but I can control where I put my focus, and that's hope in that.
Right. And it's that it's not our battle, it is the Lord's battle, and
Right.
we're a part of it, and that the Lord
Right.
will actually bring us victory, that the Lord will,
Yeah.
even when we square off against our Goliaths, even when we square off against our giants.
And, a person who's skillful with a sling is extremely accurate at quite a distance. So it's very, very doable to have slain him by hitting him in the forehead.
And David was well practiced in that as a shepherd, defending his sheep against wolves, predatory animals.
Right. He's already got street cred. That's what he says, ends up saying to Saul, right? He's, I've killed bears and lions. This guy doesn't scare me. And I feel like I always love that phrase because I think it's a lot of our, like, we don't say it enough about our own spiritual journey. Like everybody here on this, in this study, you all done hard things. You've all faced hard things. You've faced hard griefs. You've faced hard losses. You've faced hard things, and you've overcome them. And you've done, you've faced lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! And and as we face today, and whatever the thing is that's before us, to kind of remember that we can draw on, we can draw on our smooth stones. We can draw on our. It's that there's a real personal piece of this story that I always kind of hold on to. Anything
There's
else?
also a miracle. There's also, to me, a miracle involved here, too. That to many of the Jews, even though they see David as a shepherd and maybe skilled with his weapon, it's still a miracle that this little guy took down this great giant. And so it adds credence to David as king, that there's something special about this guy.
Right. The Lord's blessing is on him. Right. Exactly.
Right.
He's doing God's work, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
all right. So our last reading, about the encounter of David and Saul. So Saul, doesn't get top billing after the battle. There were, David slayed, Saul slaved his 1,000, David slayed his 10,000s. The ladies were singing and dancing, and like the ladies like David more than Saul. And so this ends up infuriating Saul, and Saul is determined to kill David and tries to hunt him down, but God's providence keeps protecting him in all these different ways along the way, that David is preserved. And then finally, David, again, kind of hearkening back to this theme from like Ruth and from is that David's faithfulness, not just to God, but even to Saul as a flawed king, but saying, I'm just trying not to be killed. I'm not trying to be unfaithful to you, but I could have killed you, but I didn't, sort of thing. And Saul, by virtue of that, kind of acknowledges that kind of his own madness in it.
But welcome to David's Psalms. Welcome
Right.
to David's Psalms.
Exactly. Like this is right. You can see the Psalms, the first part of the Psalms are all in this, exactly.
The
Yeah.
battle between
Yeah.
David
That's a
and
really good
Solomon.
point.
Right. Sorry. I'm done.
No, that's a great point. Like, so many of the Psalms that are written in this period when he's trying to avoid things. So
Yeah, David. I mean, David pours out his heart in the Psalms. Or why, why come after me, Saul? And what you just said. I'm not trying to defeat you. I'm trying to be with you, but you won't. You kind of like you won't let me. So David pours out his heart in the Psalms and his grief and his why is this happening? But he also has great ecstasy in some of his Psalms too. It's the Psalms really great stuff.
great.
So I'll leave it there.
Other thoughts about this part? All right. So
Thank you.
all right, yeah. So I'm on my way. So I did put a link in the email, and I'll get this out by email as well for those of us who are kind of asynchronous to us, or wanted to catch more of it. There's a that as we'll continue on with David's journey this next week. We're continuing. King David is again one of the big figures of the Bible, and so we'll be spending some time on him all next week. The deeper dive is a little video about David and Goliath. You might like it, you might not. It's kind of a more artsy interpretation of what one author has done with this story. I just wanted to offer you something a little offbeat and a little different this week around that. So you can check that out. And otherwise, enjoy your reading and blessings upon you all. Let's say a prayer as we go. Lord, bless all that are a part of this study and all those that are coming to read your word, that in it they may find your face, they may hear your voice, and they may know your will for them. That in all of this, that as we study and as we read, we may continue to walk in your way and draw closer to you, as is your desire for us all. Lord, we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm
Thank
off
you.
to this meeting. See you later. Bye.